Hello. Good evening to everyone. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you, ET Brand Equity, for having us here. So, obviously, we'll straight away get into the live action, as we say in the world of sport. So, just to build context, I'll just give you a quick heads up, and we all know that IPL has just concluded the massive media rights auction a couple of weeks back, and that's the flavor of the season, as we say in June 2022. Uh, Moving on, just to give a quick numbers, uh, from a sports perspective, I think it's a no-brainer that it's a absolutely growing sector, and we have seen a massive amount of traction over the last 15 years, from 2008 onwards till now, and continuing so. Phenomenal amount of trust, right from government authorities, government of India at the helm of the affairs, PSUs, private sector, the various different federations, and live action doesn't stop. I mean, I think I keep saying this. India is more than 365 days of live action on television today and on streaming platforms. So we in 2021 was a 10,000 crore economy from a sports marketing point of view. That's the advertising dollar that gets invested in the world of sport. Now, come 2023, that's going to catapult, and obviously no prizes to guess because cricket is going to be growing at a whooping 40-50% because obviously the media rights that we just saw is going to be catapulting the entire economy there. The newer sports, which obviously took a pause in COVID, are going to be back with full throttle in action in 2022. So that's expected to grow at the pace of about 20-25% on the lower base though. So obviously there's not going to be a single day in our lives which is going to go without watching a sporting action. And more importantly, from a marketing perspective, from an advertising perspective, today, without a doubt, most of us in the room will agree that sports today holds appointment viewing more than anything else because the content as a sector is so fragmented that live action in terms of sport is something which all of us are good onto, and you can't watch sports after the live action is over. So putting that into context, we have a very, very interesting mix of our panelists. We have Amritansu from Zepto, which obviously is as fast as any sports, any live sports, because obviously they are promising 10 minutes delivery, and we will get to know more about that from him in a bit. We have Uttio Majumdar from Exide, who's been a traditional advertiser, have worked on sports for a longest times, build a brand on the back of that, utilizing the television, the power of TV in sports, on ground in sports, whether it's IPL teams or India cricket, they've been all over for quite some time. We have Nilay from Ather, who's relatively new brand, and as I call him, he's a lucky charm because they got Gujarat Titans to win the IPL this year. So a very, very interesting mix of thoughts today. So I would like to open this with opening remarks from you guys because all of you have used sport at some point in time. How do you guys see it from a marketing perspective, looking at various different objectives that you would have at different point in time? So opening remarks from you guys. Amritansu, we'll start with you, yeah.
Sure. Zepto is a brand that's less than a year old. We started operations in July of last year, and we've been growing very gradually. We paced it in the initial few months, and then our services mushroomed across urban India. And IPL, which is the largest media event in the country, like beyond sports, across media, uh, it just happened to coincide with a phase when we had more than 70% coverage of the top 10 cities in the country, right? So for us, it was an opportune moment to partner with the event, and within that also we opted to stick to digital, which is quite dominating in urban India. So Hotstar actually has more viewership as per the Hotstar guys. We have to check that. It has more viewership than Star Sports or in urban India. So it made sense for us to partner with Hotstar and get that pre-targeted audience, which is very interesting because every Hotstar viewer of IPL is already a subscribed user, right? So they are potentially already familiar with digital transactions. So that made a lot of sense for us in particular. So yeah, so it's a great start in associating with sports as a media option, and we are looking forward to explore more such options.
Uttio?
Hi, Uttio here. Now, two things I want to talk about. Firstly, our association with using sports for building the brand started not in the era of IPL or 2020. This was way back when it was Test cricket and one dayers. We used to be sponsoring bilateral and even other series, Exide Cup and all. We've even signed, we were one of the first ones to sign on Dhoni as the brand ambassador much before he became the captain. And we continue that association while cricket and Exide brand is always been a strong association. For example, in IPL, we've been with RCB for the last 3 years and before that with KKR. But in between, for some of our other brands in our portfolio, we've used football for another brand that we have from Exide. And even Kabaddi, I think it was in the first or second season, we tactically used it for one of our brands. So that's one perspective on how we've used sports. But actually, if I look at it, and this is my personal take on the thing, if you look at it, brands use it in three broad ways. One is where sports is in the genes of the brand. You know, brands like Nike or even Adidas for that matter. So it's a brand where sports is basically the part of the DNA of the brand. The second part are brands which use sports. For example, let's say Pepsi, and I can recall the Nothing Official About It campaign, or even Heineken globally with football, what they've done, where they've used sport to connect with the target audience. And the third is because sports today is a huge platform. So whether it's IPL and there are brands using even simple things like title sponsorship, brands have created awareness brilliantly, or sponsorship of teams, or even I can recall one of the my favorites, and I'm sure many in the audience, the Vodafone Zuzu campaign, where they used IPL as a platform to reach out to the masses. So these are the three ways brands have been using sports. So individually, I think for each brand, it's a matter of perspective on what their objectives are, how they propose to use it, and therefore look at the ROI from that perspective.
Interesting. Nilay?
Hey, so I'm Nilay. I think firstly, Vinit said, I am the lucky charm because the Gujarat Titans won. I think they are the lucky charm because they've got me here. So I think that's the other way of looking at it. It's interesting that we didn't start with cricket. We actually started with football. We started with ISL and we started with Kerala. We didn't start by wanting to have an imprint at an all India scale, but we said that we are going to impact a particular market by taking a vehicle which resonates with consumers most over there, right? And that's the starting point. Like Uttio just mentioned three things. I would add the fourth to it, right? I think in the long term, the play in sports is just not because it coincides with a launch, not just because you want to make a campaign alive for once, but it is really to make a wide mass of audience to be aware and to consider your brand very strongly. I think awareness can be achieved through different mediums. Obviously, this as a vehicle provides you to get awareness to a larger mass of audience. But the nature of consumption of sports just allows you to make your consideration more relevant, make your brand love more relevant. And I think that's the play which over this session I would be more interested to talk about as how I see the future of brands engaging with sports events.
Uttio, you made a very interesting point about being in this from a longer term perspective. And one of the challenges and the need gap that I have seen over the last 15 plus years is that most of the Indian brands use sport tactically. So barring very, very few, like a Pepsi or Vodafone used IPL for 10 years, or maybe a Hero in the earlier era, most of the brands are not taking a long-term view. I mean, people use tactically for a year to at best 3 years. Any thoughts on that in terms of anything that you have observed in terms of the advantages to look at a longish view? Because today consumers are changing. I mean, and obviously they're following the pop culture. So, any thoughts on that?
See, it depends, like I said, on what is the objective. There are lots of the brands today. In fact, some of them, when I see them on the jersey of one team or the other, I wonder where they come from. But it helps them. So they use it tactically. So that must be their objective, to create that awareness amongst the target audience. But it's not really true that very few brands, I think lots of brands have taken a very long-term view, because sports, especially cricket, today football and let's say even badminton or many sports have become more popular. And so brands have been using it from a long-term perspective. It's not that everybody is using it tactically, and I don't think there's anything right or wrong in that. It depends on what your objective is.
Sure. So, Nilay, you spoke about. So, I mean, I'm going to be speaking less about cricket and more about non-cricket, because for obvious reasons. Because cricket obviously is the winner in the pack. So, how do you see is sport generally a part of your marketing plan, marketing DNA? Do you intend to use and engage a sport consumer through a long-term view? How do you see it from a marketing calendar standpoint?
So I think yes. Like there was this discussion of, can you have like sports as an ad hoc reaction to something that's happening? Maybe you can, but from where I think sports is something that you need to commit to as a vehicle that you would use as a brand. Okay, and to that extent, I think because a lot of opportunities of sports, while the calendar is very scheduled, the opportunities of how you can engage do not come always in a predictable manner. Sometimes somebody leaves the title sponsorship. Sometimes the tournament creates another property. So I think a brand which really wants to leverage sports marketing has to be open to many opportunities in which they can engage with different sports, not look at a one size fits all. So like the kind of association we did with Gujarat Titans was very important for us to build awareness across the country at a very fast scale, right? The kind of association we did with KBFC and we continue to do is really to engage the consumers of Kerala in a language or in a parameter that they are really engaged with. So I think those objectives keep changing, and brands need to be very open to continuously change what their means of doing things is, as long as they know what their final goal of why they're doing a sports engagement. I think it's not like a way. I would say it's the recommended way of going about in sports, rather than handpicking and deciding only one nature of association in only a particular market from a long-term perspective. That's sort of been my experience.
That's very interesting. Amritansu, you are a digital first brand, predominantly targeting a younger, ideally a younger urban kind of audience. How do you see using sports as a platform, considering you're a digital first brand and streaming is something which is of course the flavor of the season. Esports in particular, I mean, we've just seen BGMI going live on Star Sports. How do you see? Is this a part of your marketing mix, or do you also want to use it tactically, or is it a part of a long-term strategy?
See, I think largely it's a long-term strategy, and like you rightly pointed, a brand has to be where the consumers are, right? And um, currently, the exposure towards sports, the interest level in sports, and way beyond cricket, like whether we take badminton or kabaddi or football, um, the interest levels, the amount of willing engagement that the TG is up for, that's missing in a lot of the other genres in media currently, right? So which makes it uh, stand out in any case, right? From a marketing plan, from a annual, quarterly budgeting exercise. On top of it, as in ad hoc decisions on, okay, can we also amp it up, because there will be supplemental aspects to the overall media plan. So can we amp it up a bit more through maybe some outdoor campaigns, maybe a bit of some other genres. So those aspects the tactical elements will remain, but broadly the long-term strategic angle is definitely the key reason why we would associate.
So one more question I wanted to ask all you three guys, and Amritansu, you can start with this, is about how do you measure the success typically? I mean, I'm sure the measurement metric will change from brand to brand. So any thoughts? Because I think the more you measure and you are able to identify the right ROI is more when your confidence to invest in that particular genre is also. So how would any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So of course, like you had already pointed out, Zepto is a digital first brand. But the measurement techniques are a mix of old school and digital thoughts. So there's, of course, all the lift that we get, all the different platforms, they report a brand lift. Hotstar provides a brand lift survey. Facebook, Google, they all provide that when we run campaigns on them. But on top of it, I'm also a fan of the more traditional methods of evaluating how a particular campaign has worked, and which is why things like a campaign evaluation study, how has the aided and unaided awareness trended, how has consideration changed over time. So have they transacted ever? Are they willing to transact? So intent. So all of those things, I think a pre and a post, these things add a lot of layer, and especially if we take the example of IPL in particular, and we are all aware of what its the license has been sold for next year. So when we are talking of investment of that scale, we have to be very sure what we are getting out of it. So I think a mixture of top of mind awareness study is the primary reason. There might be some secondary aspects, more performance led aspects like installs, acquisition. There might be rub off effects on other campaigns, but largely I think we should look at it from a branding exercise. That's because call to actions don't really work that well, right? Because the audience is hooked on to one piece of content, right? So they are not willingly going to go to something else. Yeah.
Sure. Uttio, you have been, as you said, using sports to build a brand for almost 3 or maybe more decades. Have you seen the shift in measurement or ROI? Have your objectives obviously have changed over the years? How have you looked at that piece?
Okay, so specific engagements or activities or activations you do around a particular sporting event, yes, we definitely measure it and look at it from every specific sort of activation. What is it delivering for me? But I think the larger point which he also touched upon, if we operate a category which, it's like a grudge purchase. I've never heard of anybody who loves buying a battery. Okay? So you're cursing yourself and the whole world, because if the car's not working, it follows Murphy's law. So at that point of time when somebody tells you, the mechanic or the guy tells you you've got to spend another 4,000, 5,000, whatever it is to buy a new battery. So you're not in a happy frame of mind.
Okay, so last question, I'll keep it to Nilay. I mean, Nilay, you are a relatively new brand. The entire category is new to all of us in India. Any thoughts on measuring ROI?
See, so I think some things have been said, right? You have your brand track and it'll start to show the moment you do an activation like this, especially if you're a brand which is suddenly getting exposed to a wider set of audience, then your brand track will start responding. If you're on digital, then you will automatically start seeing a brand lift study giving you a response of people who've seen it versus people who've not seen it. A part of if you're an omni-channel business, then your website visits will give you the result. The number of calls that you get will give you a result. The footfalls will give you a result. There are enough sports marketing measurement agencies today who will give you the return of a visibility that you're getting on the ground, off the ground, etc. But I think the first journey to cross is not to expect sports marketing to be measured just by the return that it gives it that season, because that's not the intent of doing sports marketing, at least for a bulk of cases. So I would really pitch to have a little longer term view on sports marketing, have the freedom and the flexibility to do things which have a longer term impact, because in a sports marketing event there is an opportunity to do things which is of the long term. Like you said, good or bad, what gets measured gets done, right? And if only the short term measures get things get measured, then only the short term things will get done. My pitch is that sports marketing actually allows you to do things which will keep memorability for a really long time, which will keep brand stickiness. There are brands that Uttio spoke about doing an ad, which if it had to fall to the altar of how much sales will it get tomorrow, might have failed. Somebody in that organization took a call to saying, you know what, this is going to change the shape of this brand, how it's going to be remembered for years together. And I think more and more we start taking that outlook. I think better will be the quality of marketing that we do around sports and do not do tactical here and now things. That's my view.
Fantastic. So what's very clearly coming out is that the excitement continues in the world of sport, and we have a diverse category and diverse approach from a marketing perspective, who very clearly believes that sport is one of the very, very important and imperative platforms to use to build brands. So that's absolutely exciting and a fabulous conversation. Thank you guys. Thanks a lot. And we obviously have a buzzer there, and we have overshot our time. So great. I don't think we have time for any questions. So sorry about that. And I think we are going to be there for about 5-10 minutes. So anybody has any questions, we can obviously take it offline. So thank you very much. Thanks for having us once again. Great conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Vinit. Thanks to the
Thanks,
audience.
everyone.
Bye-bye.